Alright everybody, thank you for tuning into this video. Now this is going to be a video on politics. Now before you turn off that video and pause it and close it down, just hear me out for a second. I know that politics in our society has become this very bad word, right? We don't like it. We don't like all the political arguments on Facebook or anything like that. So I know it's a dirty word, but just give me a second. Let me explain why I want to do a video on it. So in our society, politics has become so, almost controversial. It's become so, extreme for everybody. And in a lot of ways, it's even become normal and accepted for people to, and a badge of honor for people to say that they don't deal with politics, they don't want to hear about politics, and that people need to put politics to the side. And while I do believe, yes, there's a time and place for politics, there's a time and place for more serious discussion, that notion that it's just something that people should be proud of not being interested in is, I think, dangerous. Because you better believe that there are plenty of people in power, influential positions, with a lot of money, who do care about politics. You can look at the lobbyist union for that, right? Lobbying is a big thing in politics in America, and there's a big reason why that's the case, because there are plenty of people who are interested in politics who don't just treat it as something to ignore. So I think it's dangerous for us to go down that road of people not wanting to talk about politics at all. That being said, I can understand why people don't want to. It can be very venomous, it can be very draining and exhausting. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm not going to be talking about any particular political issue. I just want to talk about us being able to talk about politics in a series I call Civil Discourse. So in this series of videos I want to be making, I kind of want to go over maybe how we can better have a more relaxed, more understandable political dialogue, because it is something that should be incredibly important for us to understand and communicate with each other, regardless of where we fall in the spectrum of things. Now, I'm not going to say I've always been the, greatest at this, but I do believe I've learned a lot about having more civil conversations on politics. So I would like to share a lot of what I've learned. And I'm not going to claim to be an expert. Any terms I use in here are strictly ones I've created for the video. I don't know if they correspond to any real terms or anything. These are just things that I decided to name for the video that I think has helped me become better at talking about politics. And a lot of topics in general outside of politics. I think you can use this outside of politics to kind of have better discussions with everybody. And the first topic I'm going to talk about is something that we can do on our own. So this isn't about having other people be civil. This is just about us being able to do something on our own that can maybe help us enter into a conversation more civilly. And what I mean, and the topic I'm going to discuss is research. How we research topics, because a lot of people will say they research topics, and a lot of people will say they've done their homework, and I'm not going to say they haven't done searches and they haven't done stuff like that, but when I talk to people, when I hear kind of the research they've done, I notice that there's a clear bias in it. And that bias can really reflect how we do research, and it can reflect and influence how we talk to other people about it, right? Because in order to have civil discourse, this is very important. In order to have civil discourse, you can only have it as much as you understand the topic. If you're only approaching the topic from one viewpoint, which could be biased, from your own, and you may even be doing it subconsciously, you may not be equipping yourself the best to have a civil discussion with someone else. So today I'm going to talk about research. And I think the type of research we all do typically, sometimes myself included, is what I'm going to call positive bias research. So positive bias research is research that you do that is for whatever your personal bias is, okay? And there are three types of bias research I'm going to talk about here: positive, negative, and neutral. So a positive bias research would be you looking up something that is for whatever bias you have currently. And I'll give examples. Negative would be a negative bias research. In what I'm using for in this video is any research you would do that is against whatever previous bias you have going into it. And neutral would be one that, it's neutral. It disperses any preconceived bias, whether for or against what it is. It's a neutral search. And the way you search can drastically alter the results you get back from your research, which is why I'm bringing this up. So we can say we've done research, but if we're only doing positive bias research, things that are for whatever we're already, our bias is, then odds are, when we're going into a civil discussion, it's going to be much harder for us to see from the other side because we think we already know everything, but our bias has painted what we looked up. And an example of that, I'm going to use the idea of flat Earth. Now, I don't think flat Earth is political because the Earth is not flat. It's a fact. It's not flat. So I don't think it's political. But I'm going to use it as an example. So let's say, as an example, I believe the Earth is flat. Positive bias research in this example would be me typing in maybe to Google or going to a library and asking, the question of why is the Earth flat, right? That's bias, that's positive to my previous notion of what I already believe, right? And it's going to return things that tell me why people out there think the Earth is flat, even though it's not, but those are going to be the results I get. And I think that's where a lot of people cut their personal searches and research short, is once they got the ammunition they need, they're just off and running. In general, when you're doing research, you should do positive, that's fine. You should do negative because you want to understand what the other person is, what the other people are talking about as well. So even if I don't agree with some people on political stances, I will at least do negative research on a topic. So I feel like I can at least understand where they're coming from and maybe why they have the stances they do. And I think that's important to having civil talks with each other. So in the case of flat Earth, a negative bias research would be why is the Earth not flat, right? So it's negative to what my personal bias already was. And if my bias was the Earth is round, they would be flipped, right? So positive bias research would be why is the Earth round? Negative would be why is the Earth not round? And a neutral search is one that just basically asks the question that you already have a bias for. So it ignores bias. And in the case of flat Earth, it would be what shape is the world? Would be a neutral one because it has no previous connotation of anything I'm asking. It's not painting a picture that's biased to whatever I'm asking. So those are kind of the three types of research that I like to talk about. And I think they're all important to do because they all will give you a piece of the pie that you may not otherwise have had. And it turns out when you understand somebody else a little bit better, it's much harder for you to just as easily dismiss them. And it's much easier for you to want to hear them out more, maybe understand their personal experiences on why they do it, why they have a certain stance, why they have doubts, what kind of things, you know, are holding them back from your viewpoint. And this isn't just about having other people automatically switch over to whatever viewpoint you are. That's an entirely different topic about how you have conversations with people. This is just how you prepare to have conversations. But don't expect people to just change their mind automatically just because you've done research into them. The whole point of doing that research is that you open yourself up to them. You open yourself up to another point of view. Whether you agree with it or not, you at least are trying to understand where they're coming from and maybe why they believe what they believe. And that's just incredibly important to having a civil conversation. Now, also on the terms of research, I think it's important to also have because sometimes when we're so focused specifically on positive bias research, which is what I think most of us do, we just are constantly trying to pick data points. We're just constantly trying to grab bullets to fire at the other people, right? Because we're just interested in winning. But when we're actually trying to research a topic, we're trying to understand it. So, and I bring this up because when we're just going out and we're grabbing whatever we can to get information and ammunition for our talking points, and we're trying to destroy the other side, oftentimes we get lost in this idea of we just accept blindly sometimes whatever we're told because it agrees with us. And we call it research, right? It doesn't matter who did the research. It doesn't matter what the study came from, where it came from, what other conclusion it came to. We just cherry pick what we want. So in this next part, going away from bias research now and just going into how to verify information itself, I would tell you to take a trust but verify attitude. Just because you see numbers doesn't mean the numbers are wrong, but you want to verify that the numbers are saying what they're supposed to be saying. So things to note, in general, when you're just looking at raw data, for the most part, government sites are real good ones to go and get data. If you're looking for statistics on crime, you're going to go to a government website, which is where you should go. Things about welfare programs, information about those type of things. Government sites are generally pretty good. Also, you want to actually do some type of research on any entity you're trying to cite. So for instance, sometimes you'll hear a very official sounding name from an organization who's giving you all these facts. And when you go and you look them up, and this isn't to say that that automatically discredits them, but it should give you warning signs. Because you might have something out there that says they're like the United Fellowship of Pediatricians of America or something like that, which sounds very official, but it turns out it might just be an organization of like 100 people who have a very clear defined objective for what they're trying to do in their research and a very big bias in their research. So when you're checking out sources of stuff, studies, always double check the organization you're looking at, not because they're automatically wrong, but because you may see that they have a potential bias in whatever they're doing. So be aware of that. Also, make sure that whatever you're citing has sources. This is a big one, especially in this day and age where there's just so much information being thrown out that sometimes we just get so caught up on looking at the information that we don't even actually stop to actually ask where it's coming from. So when you're trying to find good sources of research, whether it's for your bias, against your bias, or neutral, always make sure they're actually citing sources. And then check those sources. It's a good way to make sure that whatever you're using is legitimate and it's not just you grabbing whatever you can to throw it at somebody so you're trying to win an argument. Because especially when you do that, it helps you kind of delve a little bit deeper into the topic, make you think about it a little bit more, What did these people actually find? Why are these numbers being cited over different ones? And that can also help you be prepared for a more civil discussion, because when people bring it up, you'll be like, oh, I understand where they got that from. And also understanding the sources and what they're trying to do can also help open your mind up to other possibilities. Like, oh, there's this other side of the conversation I didn't understand. And there's a whole other section of people who have maybe some legitimate points that I should look at. Because the other thing about researching for civil discourse is the goal isn't to win an argument. I mean, sometimes you want to, and it feels nice, but the goal is to be able to have a conversation with other people. And I think that's kind of where we want to move to, is we should be able to have conversations with people and listen to people. And I think it's important for us to have that, because if we don't do it, other people will, and people will be making decisions for us. And if we can't talk to each other about it, we can't learn to compromise, we can't learn to understand each other, we're just gonna have people make decisions for us all the time. And we're just gonna keep going down the same kind of venomous path that we kind of see on Facebook. So yeah, so when you're doing research, don't just stop at your own bias. Actually take the time to, check other stances, check what other people are saying. Even if you don't agree with it, just do it so you can understand them better. Because there's a difference between not agreeing and then the other person being wrong. Because they may not be wrong. It may just be a different stance on the same topic, but it's important to understand that. And the more you see another side open-mindedly, the more likely you are to at least understand where they're coming from. And then you can have a conversation about it. You can even try to explain why you feel the way you do, or maybe why specific data swayed you one way or the other. You can have a conversation about it instead of it being, you're wrong, I know this is why you're wrong, you have to accept what I'm saying because I did the research, right? Have a conversation. Cite your sources, maybe not always necessarily in the conversation you're having, but at least check them so that you're getting good information. And I think this really is the first step to having civil discourse, because the more open-minded we are in how we approach topics and how we research topics, I think has a direct correlation to how open we are going to be when talking with someone else. So I'm going to go over some other stuff in other videos about civil discourse, but I think this is the most important first step, is just how we approach learning about stuff. And that should be how we do it. We should be trying to learn and not reinforce whatever bias we already have. So, yeah. So go out there. In fact, pick a topic. Pick a topic that you've had discussions on in the past, and maybe try and do what I said. Do positive bias research, negative bias research, and neutral bias research, and see if maybe it's helped you any bit. Like I said, this is stuff that I think helped me open my mind up to more possibilities, and at least being able to have better conversations with people. So, yeah. And if you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, share, subscribe. I would love to hear in the comments if you found this video interesting, and if it's, if I'm hitting on the right track for you, and because this is part of a political series that I might be carrying forward, if there's any specific topics in politics you would like to hear me talk about, please leave it in the comment section. And yeah, everybody have a great civil day. Take care.